You're standing on a vast green plain under a perpetually grey sky. The air is damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant sea salt. This is Britain, an island known for its rolling hills, colossal cliffs, and relentless rain. Its position, just a stone's throw from mainland Europe, has meant a history of constant interaction, a cycle of trade and conflict that forged one of the most influential kingdoms the world has ever seen. But this place, England, is more than just geography. You're looking at living proof of thousands of years of migration, war, and adaptation. It makes you wonder, how did this relatively small nation grow into a force that would change the course of world history? Let's find out together. Our story begins about 11,000 years ago, as the last ice age thawed. Back then, you could have walked from here to France across a land bridge called Doggerland. But as the ice sheets melted, the sea levels rose, swallowing that bridge and permanently severing Britain from the continent. That watery divide didn't stop the flow of ideas. You see, farming practices born in the Middle East arrive on these shores around 4000 BC. This is when the first permanent settlements spring up, along with monumental tombs and ceremonial stone circles. Imagine the scene. You're part of a community hauling massive bluestones over 150 miles from the Preseli Hills in South Wales. For what? To build Stonehenge. This isn't just a pile of rocks. It's a masterpiece of prehistoric engineering. You watch as builders painstakingly shape each stone, carving out mortise and tenon joints, fitting them together like giant Lego bricks. This work represents thousands of hours of collective effort. Experimental archaeology at the Stonehenge Visitor Centre today shows us what their homes might have been like. Standing inside a reconstructed hut, you realize these weren't mysterious superhumans. They were people, just like us, with families to feed and economies to sustain. What drove them to undertake such a monumental task? As the Stone Age gives way to the Bronze Age, you notice Britain changing in step with the rest of Europe. Waves of migration from the continent introduce new cultures and languages. By 1200 BC, this process has culminated in the Celtic culture that now blankets much of Western Europe. You're part of an Iron Age Celtic tribe, and life is far from primitive. Your society is a complex agricultural community with bustling trade links to the mainland, bringing both wealth and the constant threat of invasion. Despite frequent wars between tribes, you all share a similar language, the ancestor of modern Celtic tongues, and a common set of beliefs. To protect yourselves, you help build impressive defensive structures like Maiden Castle. Your religion resembles the pagan faiths common across northwestern Europe. The Romans would later note how similar your religious practices are to those of the Gauls. The most striking figures in your society are the Druids. They aren't just priests, they are the elite. Political figures, physicians, judges, historians, and advisors whose ideas hold deep sway over the people. You are a druid. You hold knowledge not in books but in memory. Writing, you believe, weakens the mind, so you pass down your wisdom through the spoken word. This is why so much of your world will be known only through archaeology and the records of your eventual conquerors. The first written account of Britain appears in 55 BC, with the arrival of Julius Caesar. You watch his ships approach the shore. He claims his invasion is justified because your people supported the Gauls' resistance against Rome. His two expeditions, in 55 and 54 BC, failed to gain any permanent territory. The real Roman conquest comes nearly a century later, in 43 AD, under Emperor Claudius. You hear he's doing this to bolster his own image. His contemporaries see him as weak, even foolish. He wants to succeed where Caesar failed. 40,000 Roman soldiers land on the Kentish shores. They see your island as the edge of the known world, home to wild barbarians and demons. But a strategic mistake by the local Catuvalauni tribe allows them to land with almost no resistance. The Romans are here to stay. You see them establish forts, build triumphal arches, and push inland. Many tribes surrender without a fight in the face of Rome's unstoppable military machine. In open battle, your warriors stand little chance, though you find the Romans more vulnerable in guerrilla warfare. When Claudius himself visits, he arrives on an elephant, a spectacle that awes the local population and cements Roman power. Roman rule takes root, but it's not without resistance. Around 60 AD, you witness one of the greatest uprisings, led by Queen Boudica of the Iceni tribe. After her husband's death, the Romans flog her and rape her daughters. Her vengeance is terrible. You see her army rise, killing thousands and burning 3 cities to the ground. The rebellion is so violent that Emperor Nero considers abandoning Britain altogether. But in the end, Boudica is defeated. She likely takes her own life to avoid capture. After this, Britain remains a solid Roman province for nearly 350 years, until 410 AD. The long Roman occupation leaves a lasting legacy on the land that will become modern England. You walk on paved roads, marvel at sophisticated infrastructure, and live in cities like Londinium, Chester, and York. Most importantly, a new religion, Christianity, begins to spread. But by the late 4th century, the Roman Empire is crumbling under the weight of Germanic invasions. Rome begins to withdraw its legions from Britain around 370 AD. By 410, only a few hundred Roman soldiers remain. You receive the message from Emperor Honorius. You must now see to your own defense. The collapse of Roman authority is a profound shock. Romano-British culture is cut off from the continent and becomes more isolated. Though you hold on to your Christian faith in many ways, life reverts to pre-Roman patterns. You try to build your own defenses based on Roman models, but it's not enough. The Picts from Scotland and the Scotti from Ireland begin to raid your lands. In desperation, you turn to a Roman-style solution: hiring mercenaries. Your leaders hire Germanic warriors from northern Germany, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, to fight off the Picts. They are brutally effective. The Picts are defeated, but the price is high. The Saxons are given land in Kent as payment. This decision opens the floodgates for larger-scale Anglo-Saxon migrations. Was it a violent invasion that displaced the native Celtic population, or a more gradual cultural assimilation? Historians still debate it. Either way, the result is the same. The Anglo-Saxons replaced the Romano-Britain language, culture, and people with their own Germanic traditions. Their language evolves over centuries into modern English. Around 500 AD, a Romano-British leader named Ambrosius Aurelianus secures a major victory against the Saxons at the Battle of Mons Badonicus. This victory carves out a space for the Britons to survive in the west, in what will become Wales and Cornwall. It is this period of brief British resurgence that gives rise to the legends of King Arthur. The newcomers, Angles, Saxons, Jutes, and Frisians, speak similar Germanic languages, allowing them to communicate easily. Over time, the distinctions between these tribes blur. They begin to call themselves Anglo-Saxons, or Angle-kin in their own tongue. The very name England comes from Ingler land, the land of the Angles. From about 500 to 800 AD, you live in an Anglo-Saxon England divided into several kingdoms, the most prominent being Kent, Wessex, Sussex, Mercia, and Northumbria. During the 7th century, you witness the conversion of the Anglo-Saxons from their old Germanic pagan beliefs to Christianity, a change that reconnects England to the wider European world. Despite conflicts, this is a time of economic stability and prosperity, where Anglo-Saxon language, religion, and culture put down deep roots. By the end of the 8th century, the land has consolidated into 4 major kingdoms: Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, and Wessex. But a new storm is gathering on the horizon. You huddle in your village as longships appear off the coast. The Vikings have arrived. Your king, Alfred of Wessex, is a man who can remain calm and turn problems into opportunities, even in this desperate time. He believes all the peoples of the island, even the Vikings, should be united under a single kingdom. He understands the Vikings came for wealth and fertile land and predicts their desire for war will diminish once they acquire it. He develops a system called the Danegeld. When the Vikings attack Wessex, Alfred offers them money instead of a battle. For many Vikings who have learned the Anglo-Saxons are not an easy target, this is an attractive offer. This strategy prevents the Saxon forces from being worn down by constant warfare. In 878, Alfred defeats the Vikings at the Battle of Edington, but shows them mercy, allowing them to be baptized as Christians. He captures London in 886, and, with the help of his son Edward and son-in-law Ethelred of Mercia, continues to push the Vikings back. Alfred's strategy is working. The Anglo-Saxons are slowly reclaiming England. When Alfred dies in 899, his son Edward takes over the struggle. Edward's sister, Ethelflaed, rules Mercia after her husband's death, effectively uniting the kingdoms of Wessex and Mercia. The two siblings continue to reconquer lands held by the Vikings. After Ethelflaed's death in 918, Edward becomes the sole ruler of both kingdoms. When he dies in 924, he leaves his son, Ethelstan, a kingdom larger than any English king has ever possessed. When Ethelstan is crowned king of all the English, the kingdom of England is truly born. But this unity is short-lived. In 978, the Vikings return, led by the Danish king Harold Bluetooth. The king on the throne, Ethelred the Unready, is not strong enough to resist. For 20 years, England is forced to pay tribute to the Vikings, severely damaging the kingdom's economy. In 1002, Ethelred makes a fatal mistake, ordering the massacre of Danish settlers in his lands. This sparks a new 10-year war. The Danish king, Sweyn Forkbeard, drives Ethelred into exile in Normandy. When Forkbeard dies in 1014, his son Knut defeats Ethelred's son, Edmund Ironside, to seize the throne. Knut the Great expands his rule to include Denmark and Norway, creating a North Sea empire. However, his empire quickly dissolves after his death in 1035. The Anglo-Saxon dynasty returns in 1042 with Edward the Confessor. When Edward dies childless in 1066, it triggers a succession crisis. The powerful nobleman Harold Godwinson hastily has himself crowned king. But in the same year, the king of Norway, Harald Hardrada, invades. You watch as Harold Godwinson's army marches north and wins a stunning victory at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, where Hardrada is killed by an arrow. This battle marks the end of the Viking Age. But just 3 days after his victory, Harold gets word that another invader has landed in the south, William, Duke of Normandy. William has a strong claim to the throne through his kinship with Edward the Confessor. The Normans are descendants of Vikings who had settled in France 150 years earlier. At the Battle of Hastings, you witness William's army of about 10,000 face Harold's exhausted army of 8,000. The Normans have more archers and cavalry, which they use to devastating effect. King Harold is famously killed, supposedly by an arrow to the eye. On Christmas Day 1066, William is crowned the new King of England. The Norman Conquest begins a radical transformation. William crushes a series of English rebellions and asserts his authority over the neighbouring kingdoms of Wales and Scotland. He commissions the Domesday Book, a comprehensive survey of his new kingdom's lands, people and economic power. You see that nearly all the Anglo-Saxon nobility has been replaced by Normans, and French has become the language of the ruling class. The blending of Norman French and Old English gives rise to modern English. William dies in 1087, and his successors plunge the country into civil war, a period known as the Anarchy. The conflict between King Stephen and Empress Matilda finally ends in 1154, when Matilda's son, Henry, takes the throne as Henry II, beginning the Plantagenet dynasty. His Angevin empire stretches from northern England to the Pyrenees. You now live in an England ruled by French-speaking kings. Henry himself speaks terrible English. He is ambitious and energetic, but his fierce temper leads to tragedy. His infamous outburst, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" leads 4 of his knights to murder the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Becket, in 1170. This act deeply damages Henry's reputation. His son, Richard III the Lionheart, succeeds him in 1189. A great warrior, he spends only 6 months of his reign in England, seeing it mainly as a source of funds for his European empire. He dies in France in 1199. His younger brother, John, takes the throne. He is not a good king. He loses Normandy to the French, and to compensate he imposes heavy taxes, seizes land, and even murders a rival for the throne. John's tyranny forces the nobles and the church to rebel. On June 15, 1215, you are there at Runnymede as they force him to sign Magna Carta, the Great Charter. This document contains 63 clauses limiting the king's power over his barons and the church. While it doesn't yet apply to ordinary people, it establishes the principle of the rule of law, the idea that even the king is subject to God's law. It lays the groundwork for modern parliament by requiring the king to seek the consent of his nobles for many decisions. John signs it reluctantly, with no intention of obeying it, and the Pope soon declares it invalid. This sparks a civil war that lasts until John's death. His son, Henry III, struggles with the legacy of Magna Carta, eventually summoning a council that can be seen as an early version of Parliament. His successor, Edward I, Longshanks, reforms the English legal system, makes Parliament a permanent institution, and brutally suppresses revolts in Wales. He also initiates the expulsion of Jews from England, which lasts until the 17th century. Edward's reign is consumed by a long and costly war with Scotland, led by figures like William Wallace. He captures the Stone of Scone, the coronation stone of Scottish kings, and brings it to England. His weak son, Edward II, loses territory back to the Scots under Robert the Bruce. His reign coincides with a famine that kills about 10% of the population. He is deposed in 1327. His son, Edward III, eventually makes a truce with Scotland, but a new threat emerges, an alliance between Scotland and France. The long-standing rivalry between England and France culminates in the 100 Years' War, which lasts from 1337 to 1453. You see English armies win major victories at Crécy, Poitiers, and Agincourt, thanks in large part to the devastating power of the English longbow. Henry V's victory at Agincourt makes him the master of northern France, but he dies in 1422, leaving his infant son, Henry VI, as king of both England and France. A new figure emerges to change the course of the war, Joan of Arc. You hear the stories of this peasant girl who claims saints have given her a mission to drive the English out of France. She leads the French army to lift the siege of Orléans and becomes a commander. Though her own troops are initially hesitant, her success convinces them. But at just 19, she is captured by the Burgundians and sold to the English, who burn her at the stake as a heretic. Her death only strengthens French resolve. The 100 Years' War technically ends in 1453 with the Battle of Castillon. England loses all its territories in modern France except for Calais. As one war ends, another begins at home, the Wars of the Roses. This 30-year civil war is fought between two branches of the Plantagenet dynasty, the House of Lancaster, Red Rose, and the House of York, White Rose. The war ends in 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth Field, when Henry Tudor of the Lancastrian line kills Richard III, the last Yorkist king. Henry VII marries Elizabeth of York, uniting the two houses and founding the Tudor dynasty. He must now restore order after the chaos of war. He dies in 1509 and is succeeded by his 17-year-old son, Henry VIII. Henry marries his brother Arthur's widow, Catherine of Aragon. But Catherine fails to produce a male heir, giving him only a daughter, Mary. This obsession with a male heir drives Henry to a drastic step. In 1527, he decides to divorce his wife. When the Pope refuses to annul the marriage, Henry breaks with the Catholic Church and establishes his own Church of England. This event, the English Reformation, is more political than religious, but it permanently changes English history. He marries Anne Boleyn, but when she also gives him a daughter, Elizabeth, he has her executed on false charges of witchcraft. He finally gets his male heir, Edward, with his third wife, Jane Seymour, but she dies from complications of childbirth. Henry marries 3 more times but has no other children. Henry's only son, Edward VI, takes the throne in 1547, but dies of tuberculosis before he is 16. During his short reign, England moves toward a more radical Protestantism. His devoutly Catholic half-sister, Mary I, succeeds him. She is determined to return England to Catholicism. Her reign is marked by the brutal persecution of Protestants. Nearly 280 are burned at the stake, earning her the name Bloody Mary. She dies childless in 1558, and her Protestant half-sister, Elizabeth of Festus, ascends the throne, beginning the Elizabethan age, a golden era in English history. You feel a sense of renewed hope as Elizabeth re-establishes the Protestant Church of England, but with a degree of religious tolerance for Catholics. The economy booms, the population grows, and great writers like William Shakespeare produce their masterpieces. Seafarers like Sir Walter Raleigh and Sir Francis Drake help England rise as a formidable naval power. Known as the Virgin Queen, Elizabeth never marries, likely fearing the political instability it could cause. Despite her tolerant policies, foreign Catholic powers remain hostile. Mary, Queen of Scots, a Catholic with a claim to the English throne, becomes a focal point for plots against Elizabeth. After being imprisoned for over 18 years, Elizabeth has her executed. This infuriates King Philip II of Spain, to whom Mary had willed her claim. Vowing to place a Catholic monarch on the English throne, Philip prepares the Spanish Armada. But a combination of sabotage by Sir Francis Drake, terrible weather and superior English naval tactics leads to the Armada's defeat. You hear Elizabeth's famous speech to her troops, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too." She defends Protestantism and England from foreign domination, paving the way for Britain to become a global power. She dies in 1603, the last monarch of the Tudor dynasty, leaving behind a legacy of strength and cultural brilliance that defines an entire era. The 17th century opens on a kingdom seething with tension. When Charles I takes the throne in 1625, you sense trouble ahead. Unlike his father, James I, Charles is stubborn and unwilling to compromise. This attitude will eventually lead him to the executioner's block. His reign is a constant struggle with Parliament over governance and religion. His attempts to impose a high Anglican style of worship on the fiercely Puritan and Presbyterian Church of Scotland sparks a rebellion known as the Bishops' Wars. His armies are defeated. Financially broke, Charles is forced to summon Parliament in 1640 to raise funds, but the Long Parliament is determined to address its grievances first. Led by John Pym, they impeach the king's top ministers. Tensions escalate until August 22, 1642, when Charles raises the royal standard at Nottingham. The English Civil War has officially begun. The country is torn apart, brother against brother. The war rages across the country. In 1644, parliamentary forces, allied with the Scots, win a decisive victory at the Battle of Marston Moor. But the turning point comes in June 1645 at the Battle of Naseby. You see the king's army annihilated. A cavalry leader named Oliver Cromwell emerges as a military genius. After the defeat, Charles becomes a fugitive. By 1648, the army, now under Cromwell's influence, purges Parliament of its opponents, creating the Rump Parliament. This new body puts the king on trial for treason. The verdict is unprecedented. On January 30th, 1649, you witness a king being publicly executed by his own people. The monarchy is abolished, and England is declared a commonwealth, a republic. Cromwell is sent to crush royalist and Catholic forces in Ireland, which he does with infamous brutality. He then subdues Scotland. In 1653, he dissolves the Rump Parliament and is declared Lord Protector for life. But when he dies in 1658, his son Richard lacks his authority, and the Republic crumbles. In 1660, the monarchy is restored, and Charles II, son of the executed king, returns from exile. It's a time of relief for many. The new king is pragmatic, determined never to go on his travels again. The Cromwellian army is disbanded, and an act of indemnity and oblivion pardons most who fought against the crown. However, it excludes those who signed his father's death warrant. 13. Regicides are executed. In a gruesome act of posthumous revenge, the bodies of Oliver Cromwell and 2 others are exhumed and hanged. Charles II re-establishes the Church of England, but you notice the king has Catholic sympathies. He signs a secret treaty with King Louis XIV of France, promising to restore Catholicism in England in exchange for French funds. This fuels a wave of anti-Catholic hysteria known as the Popish Plot, leading to the execution of many innocent people. By the time Charles dies, he has achieved a near absolute level of power. His brother, James II, a zealous and openly practicing Catholic, inherits the throne. James II's project to restore Catholicism puts him on a collision course with his Protestant nation. The tipping point comes in 1688, when 7 bishops are put on trial for refusing to read the king's declaration of indulgence in their churches. Their acquittal is met with wild celebrations even among the king's own soldiers. That same year, James has a Catholic son and heir. This is the last straw. Protestant nobles invite the Dutch prince William of Orange, who is married to James's Protestant daughter Mary, to invade. William lands with a powerful army, and James's regime collapses. He flees to France. This bloodless coup is known as the Glorious Revolution. A special convention parliament offers the throne jointly to William and Mary. They accept, but first they must sign the Bill of Rights, a document that severely limits the power of the monarchy and establishes the supremacy of Parliament. You have just witnessed the birth of a constitutional monarchy. This new stability sets the stage for the nation's future growth. A new century, a new identity. In 1707, the English and Scottish parliaments unite, and you are now part of the Kingdom of Great Britain. 100 years later, union with Ireland creates the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. This consolidation of power, along with a new Hanoverian dynasty on the throne, allows Britain to flourish. Trade expands, and a mercantilist economy, backed by the undisputed might of the Royal Navy, begins to build a global maritime empire. But the real engine of Britain's rise is not in its parliament or on the high seas. It's happening in quiet villages, a technological revolution that will change the world forever. You are in Coalbrookdale, where an ironmaster named Abraham Darby has perfected a new method of smelting iron using coke instead of charcoal. This allows for higher temperatures, bigger furnaces, and cheaper mass-produced iron. This single innovation is the spark that ignites the Industrial Revolution. But making all this iron is one thing, moving it is another. The Darby family provides a spectacular solution, the Iron Bridge. It's not just a bridge, it's a declaration. Forged from 384 tons of iron, its more than 1,700 unique parts are assembled using woodworking techniques. When it opens in 1781, it stands amid green hills. 20 years later, the landscape is a dark, smoky, industrial hellscape, a real-life Mordor. This image captures both the awesome power and the dark side of the new industrial age. The immense productive capacity of the revolution fuels Britain's colonial ambitions. Merchants begin to dominate world trade, pushing out French, Dutch, Spanish, and Portuguese rivals in Africa, India, and the Far East. This competition often leads to war. The rise of imperialism is debated at home. For leaders like Disraeli, it's about strengthening the empire and making the name of Britain respected. For his rivals, it's just blustering arrogance. Whatever the interpretation, industrial might is the foundation of global power. The 19th century sees Britain become an unparalleled global power, presiding over the largest empire in history. The symbol of this era is Queen Victoria, who comes to the throne as a young woman and reigns for 63 years. Her husband, Prince Albert, becomes a valued advisor. The empire's most dramatic expansion is in Asia, particularly India. The East India Company transforms from a trading enterprise into a military and political power. But this expansion is brutal. In 1756, the Nawab of Bengal captures Calcutta and imprisons 146 British men, women and soldiers in a tiny dungeon just 20 square meters. In the suffocating heat, nearly all of them die overnight. This Black Hole of Calcutta tragedy sparks a swift British reprisal. A year later, at the Battle of Plassey, Robert Clive's small army, aided by a traitor in the Nawab's ranks, defeats an enemy force of 50,000. This victory gives Britain control of the wealthy province of Bengal. The greatest shock to the empire comes in 1857 with the Indian Mutiny, also known as the Sepoy Rebellion. Rumors spread among Indian soldiers that new rifle cartridges are greased with pig and cow fat, an insult to both Muslims and Hindus. The rebellion that follows is incredibly violent. At Cawnpore, a leader named Nana Sahib massacres a surrendering British garrison. Hundreds of women and children are brutally murdered and thrown into a well. Such atrocities reveal the brutal realities of imperial rule. Despite this, the empire continues to expand, and in 1877, Queen Victoria is proclaimed Empress of India. At home, Britain faces its own turmoil. The Chartist movement emerges from the social inequalities of the Industrial Revolution, demanding political reforms like universal male suffrage. In Ireland, the Great Famine leads to mass starvation and emigration, fueling movements for independence. Abroad, Britain finds itself drawn into new conflicts, like the Crimean War against Russia, a conflict that reveals deep flaws in the British military. The end of the century sees Britain clashing with Dutch-descended Boer settlers in South Africa. The Second Boer War exposes further military weaknesses, but also demonstrates the immense support the colonies are willing to give the mother country. You live in a nation at the peak of its power, but the contradictions are stark. For every grand imperial victory, there is a story of brutal suppression. For every new factory, there are thousands living in squalor. The Victorian era is an age of immense progress and profound social tension, of glorious triumphs and a dark, hidden underbelly. As the 20th century dawns, Britain is at the zenith of its global dominance, but storm clouds are gathering. The First World War will expose the deep social and economic strains beneath the surface of imperial grandeur. It will challenge the nation in ways never before seen, forcing a total mobilization of society. The losses will be staggering not just on the battlefield, but in the very fabric of the nation. An entire way of life is about to end. The Great War pushes the nation to the brink of bankruptcy. The immense debt and consumption of resources cripple Britain's economy, marking the beginning of the end of its global supremacy. London's status as the world's financial centre is challenged as economic power shifts towards the United States. You see the government's control over society increase to unprecedented levels. The traditional aristocratic way of life, with its grand country houses and armies of servants, is shattered by the war's sacrifices. Many servants leave to work in war industries and never return, signaling a fundamental shift in the social hierarchy. While the empire is at its largest extent on the map, the war highlights the immense cost of maintaining it. Soldiers and resources from the colonies make a vital contribution to the war effort, but this shared sacrifice also plants the seeds of independence movements. In the aftermath, the desire for self-determination among the colonies grows stronger, foreshadowing the eventual dissolution of the empire. Just 20 years after the devastation of one world war, you are plunged into another. World War II is one of the most defining events in modern British history, and it effectively bankrupts the nation, accelerating the end of its global dominance. Life changes dramatically. Private estates like Bletchley Park are requisitioned for the war effort, becoming nerve centres for military operations. You spend nights in air raid shelters as cities are bombed and essential goods are rationed. The Blitz tests the resilience of the civilian population and forges a spirit of national unity. In this dark hour, the leadership of Winston Churchill becomes a symbol of defiance. His speeches, promising only blood, toil, tears and sweat, inspire the nation. His defiant stance against attempts to break the country's will cements his place as a national hero. The war also showcases British innovation, particularly in technology and intelligence. But victory comes at a colossal price. The nation emerges exhausted and economically shattered. The immense economic burden of two world wars makes it impossible for Britain to maintain direct rule over its vast global territories. You are living in a very different post-war world, one characterized by expanding democracy, the creation of a social welfare state, and a declining empire. The sacrifices of the war lead to demands for greater social security. The National Health Service, NHS, is born, providing free healthcare for all. The process of decolonization accelerates. Ireland's independence in 1922 was an early sign. After Sud, faced with growing nationalist movements, Britain recognizes that direct rule is no longer feasible or desirable. The independence of India in 1947 is the pivotal moment, followed swiftly by colonies in Africa and Asia. This marks the symbolic end of Britain's time as a world superpower. But it is not an end, so much as a transformation. The empire evolves into the Commonwealth of Nations, a voluntary association of independent states, a new kind of relationship for a new world. As the British Empire recedes, a new global conflict emerges: the Cold War. The ideological struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union, armed with nuclear weapons, casts a shadow over the world. As a key ally of the US, Britain must prepare for the threat of a nuclear attack. Secret underground bunkers are built across the country, like the one near York. These are designed to maintain regional governance, even if cities are obliterated. You are a volunteer in the Royal Observer Corps, tasked with staffing these bunkers. Your job is to track the location and fallout of nuclear strikes on a giant map, providing vital information to what's left of the government. This grim reality is a testament to how the world has changed. Britain develops its own atomic bomb in 1952, and the constant threat of annihilation becomes a part of daily life. These bunkers are somber monuments to the psychological impact of the Cold War and the lengths a nation will go to in the face of an existential threat. Britain's story is one of constant adaptation. From ancient stone circles to medieval castles, from the fiery furnaces of the Industrial Revolution to the subterranean bunkers of the Cold War, the tale of England is one of perpetual reinvention. It's a history that showcases the human struggle for survival against the odds, a cycle of conflict and compromise, innovation and creativity. This legacy of thousands of years has woven the rich, diverse fabric of Britain today. This transformative journey gives you a unique perspective on how the events of the past have shaped the nation's identity and its place in the modern world. The crises, the civil wars, the industrial and technological revolutions, the expansion and dissolution of an empire, these have all been defining moments that have forged the character of Britain. It is a story that is far from over, one that continues to be written with every passing day. Take a moment to think about that. We'll see you next time.